Hello everybody, welcome to another classicmotorbikes.net how-to video. Before we get going, I'd just like to say I am suffering quite badly with hay fever. My eyes are itchy, my nose keeps running, and I've got a horrible headache. So I do apologise if I don't sound my best. So this how-to guide is how to fit wheel bearings. I'd just like to thank our sponsors, MSP, Motorcycle Spare Parts Europe, for providing the parts for these series. So let's open the box and have a look. These are all genuine parts. Got some brand new wheel bearings. And we've got some brand new genuine oil seals. The motorcycle we're going to be working on for the how-to guides might not be the same as your bike, but we're going to try and make it nice and easy, and we're going to try our best to make the videos generic as possible so it applies to as many bikes as possible. If there's a how-to video you'd like to see or on a specific bike, let us know in the comments and we'll try and do our best and film some for you. When we're working on a bike, we're going to need tools. So let's talk through the ones we're going to need to use today. So we've got a 3/8 ratchet and socket. This is to remove the front brake calipers and undo the pinch bolts on the front forks. They're normally between 10 and 13 millimeters depending on what bike you're using, but a 3/8 ratchet is more than good enough for this job. To undo the front wheel spindle, we're going to use a 1/2 inch ratchet and appropriate socket. These can range anything from 15mm up to sort of 30mm and everything in between, again depending on what bike you're using. It's much easier to undo the spindle with a 1/2 inch ratchet and socket. Once we've finished the job, make sure we do all our bolts up to the correct torque setting. So we're going to need a torque wrench. The one I've got here is a 3/8 one. The next tool is a little bit more specialised than your standard hand tools, and it's actually a motorcycle brake piston removal tool. It's got lots of parts inside and it works off a slide hammer principle, but I'll be explaining more on how this works later on in the video. With every job you do on a motorcycle, there's normally more than one way to do it, and when refitting the bearings you can use a tool that winds them in, or the other option is to use a little bit of force and hit them in. I use a good solid rubber mallet, and we'll also be using the old bearings as well, so we won't be throwing those away until we've finished the job. So the bearings aren't damaged, we'll also be using a piece of wood to help spread the load and make the job that bit easier. One of the tools you'll also need is a flat-headed screwdriver. A medium to large size is better, and this is to help remove any seals. Before we start working on the bike, I'd just like to give you a small warning. Working on your bike can be dangerous, and if you don't do the work properly, it can create dangerous situations or an unsafe motorcycle. So if you're unsure about the work you're going to be doing and you're not 100% confident in the work you're going to be doing, please do not attempt to do this at home. As much as these are how-to guides, they're definitely for entertainment purposes, and I wouldn't take it as 100% professional advice. So with that being said, let's start working on the bike. So the first job is to remove the brake calipers from the discs to allow the wheel to be removed. So we're going to use our 3/8 socket and 3/8 ratchet to undo the 2 bolts here. When I've removed the caliper, I like to put the bolts back in, and then that way we're not going to lose them and we know where the bolts came from. It's also a good idea to put a piece of rag or something on your wheel when you move the caliper back, just so you don't damage any paintwork. Now the brake calipers are removed, we can start removing the wheel. So the first thing we need to do is undo these 2 fork pinch bolts. Now we can start undoing the front wheel spindle with our 1/2 inch socket and ratchet. The spindle's been undone. You can remove it, and then the wheel slides out. Now the wheel's ready. I've got it on a nice flat hard surface with something underneath to protect the discs and the wheel. And what we're going to have to do before we take the bearing out is remove the oil seal, which looks a little rough. We're going to use this screwdriver. We're going to gently put it under, and then we're going to gently twist. We're going to go around it, twist, you can see it's gradually working its way out. It's almost there. And there we go. 1 oil seal removed. So to get the bearing out, we're going to use a brake piston removal tool. Now it's not really designed for wheel bearings, but we are doing a job that's sort of similar. We're trying to pull something out. So I'll show you how it works. We have to undo this piece here. We have this bit here that's got the slots, which allows it to expand, and it fits inside the bearing. We slide that over on this taper, put that back over, and then do this piece up here. So what we do now is we put that inside the bearing, and then we do it up nice and tight. Obviously the bearing can still spin, and then what we do is we use the slide hammer attachment. We screw this into the top, and then we need to try and hold the wheel down and use the slide hammer function, and it should remove the bearing. So this might take a few goes, but it will come out. And there we have it. One of the wheel bearings has been removed. And we can remove the internal spacer as well. We're on to the second side, and we need to do the same thing all over again. So we're going to remove the seal. She's almost there. And there we go. Second wheel bearing removed. So we've got our new bearing. And if you can see in there, it's already come greased up, ready to go. So what we need to do is install it in the wheel. I've given everything a good clean, as you should always do when you're fitting new parts. Make sure everything's clean. So what I need to do is now put the new wheel bearing in. Normally when I do this, I'll actually put the bearings in the freezer for a couple of hours, which will actually help shrink the bearing, and then it'll make it easier to go into the wheel. Now you could heat the wheel up as well to make the wheel expand, but if you do it too much or you've never done it before, you can damage your paint on your wheel, which I don't think anyone wants to do that. So I've actually forgot to put these in the freezer this time, so we'll do it as they come out of the packet, so should be quite interesting. Now when we're putting in the new bearing, we need to make sure it goes in completely level and not at an angle, because it will damage the wheel and obviously it won't sit right. When fitting the new bearing, we want to make sure if we put any stress or anything on the bearing, it's on the outer race. You don't want to put it on the inner one, because you could damage the bearing. You're less likely to damage it if you do the outside one. So what we're going to do is use a rubber mallet and a piece of wood. You can see I've used this before, and then we put this on. Make sure the bearing sits level. And then what we need to do is tap it gently. Make sure we get it nice and level. The wood is stopping the bearing from being damaged. Now we've got to a stage where the bearing's sitting completely flush, but it actually needs to go in that little bit further. This is where using the old bearing comes in handy, because it's exactly the same size. You can fit it over the top, and you can use that to drive the bearing in that little bit further. Suzuki have got some special tools for this, and even Suzuki say to use the old bearing to drive the new one in. So that's what we're going to do. Try and hit it evenly. You can normally feel from the other side when the bearing's in there. There we go. Top bearing's out. We've used that to drive the new one in. It's all level and all how it should be. So now it's time to put the seal in. We've got a lovely brand new genuine seal. So we're going to Make sure it goes in nice and level. And there we go, I've got a new oil seal fitted. Now we need to move around to the other side. We can fit the other bearing, and we can fit the spacer and then the seal, and then we're almost done. So before we put the new bearing in, give it a good clean. We'll plonk the spacer in. We've got a lovely brand new bearing. We've got our old bearing as well, which we'll use in a minute. Got a piece of wood. We just got to make sure we hit it in nice and square. You can use the old bearing to go on top. Use a piece of wood again. There we go, she's starting to move down. You can still hear the spacer moving around, and that'll almost stop moving when the bearing's in the right place, but there will still be a little bit of movement in it. So the bearing is seated where it needs to be. You can hear the spacer move around just a tiny bit, but it's all lined up. And all we need to do is remove that bearing. So we'll use the slide tool again, just like we did on the other side. And a few slides of this. There we go, bearing's out. We just need to put the final seal in. These are quite a tight fit. We're going to do our best to tap it in level. If it doesn't go in, take it back out, give it another try. There we go. That's the wheel bearings fitted with the new seals. Now we need to put it back in the bike. Now it's time to fit the front wheel again. We're going to remove the spindle. When I'm working on a bike and I have to take a spindle out or something like that, I always tend to put the spacers back on in the order that they've come off. That way you make sure the spacer goes back where it should be and you don't lose any while working on the bike. Luckily this one doesn't have any spacers, so it's not something we've had to worry about. The other thing I need to be mindful of is the front wheel. I need to make sure I put it on in the correct direction. Because this doesn't have a speedo drive, you can't tell which is the left and right hand side. There's normally a little arrow on one of the spokes that tells you the direction of travel, so make sure you put your wheel back in the right way. So I'm going to lift it up. Give it a wiggle. Now it's time to do the spindle up with the 1/2 inch socket and ratchet. Now that's kind of stopped and bottomed out. What you need to do for the next step is do the front spindle up to the correct torque setting, which is different for every bike, so you'll need to find out the torque settings for your specific bike. So we'll set the spindle to the correct torque setting, and once the spindle's done up, we then need to make sure we do the pinch bolts up to their correct torque setting as well. And there we have it. We've got the wheel fitted with its new wheel bearings, and it moves rather smoothly. Now there's one final piece of the puzzle, and that is refitting the brake calipers. Now once you've fitted your brake calipers, before you ride the bike anywhere or do anything, please pump the front brake lever up. Obviously the calipers have been off, the pads will be further apart than they was before, and if you don't do that before you ride it, you could need to use the front brakes for the first time and the brakes don't work properly because they've not been pumped back up to the disc. So before you ride your bike, please pump up your front brakes so you don't have an accident. Okay, so that's the job done for today. I haven't put the calipers back on because they're the next part to come off, as the next how-to video is going to be on rebuilding these 6-pot brake calipers. I just want to say another massive thank you to MSP for sponsoring this series of videos. We really do appreciate it, and if you need some brand new genuine parts for your bike, definitely check the guys out. Their links in the description for all your genuine parts. And like I said at the start of the video, if you're ever unsure or you're a bit concerned that you're not 100% on something, please seek professional advice. The last thing I'd want anyone to do is work on their bike and not be 100% sure and then go out and hurt themselves because they haven't done the job properly. I love that lots of people are learning and picking up new things. I think it's great, but please be careful, guys. I really do mean that. So if you like this video and you want to see more, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon, and you'll get a notification every time we do an upload. So until next time, we'll see you later.